Mike check 1212. It's the Y2K collector. And the beautiful thing about buying import video games is that whenever you get them in the mail, they always wind up sending you these amazing thank you cards. It's like great. Whenever I order something from someone, like whether it be off of eBay or Mercari, they barely give me, like, you know, bubble wrap. They just toss that thing in there in the box or the envelope, and it's like they raw dog the whole experience. But every time I've purchased a game offline or something offline, they always give me like these little cool pieces of origami. I think that's so sick. I usually keep their thank you cards because they always come with something a little extra. And usually when I order something import, it's usually coming from Japan. I ordered this Neo Geo controller there from the Waku Waku R shop. And you know, this vendor is really great. They do a really good job of refurbishing original Neo Geo CD controllers, which I wanted to have for my AES. Those controllers are getting ridiculously expensive, by the way. Like, it's crazy. I mean, anything Neo Geo is expensive, but I really just wanted to have one so that I could get a better handle on some of the shoot 'em ups that I have for the Neo Geo. But I'm getting off on a tangent. The reason why I'm talking about this is because import games are really an amazing way for you to build out a strong collection, whether you don't have any games at all, or whether you have like a small collection, but you're trying to figure out how to maximize it or add some of the more sought after titles, or maybe some of the more rare titles. Importing games is great, and I used to be against it because it was like NTSC everything for me. But about midway through my collecting journey, I really discovered the power of imports, and I just kind of wanted to share some of, you know, what I have here with you today, and just kind of show you how great it could be. And you'd be shocked, especially when it comes to some of the more modern consoles, what would be considered imports. So I've got a whole bunch of imports right here that I'll kind of showcase and kind of share with you here. And we'll start with some of the more modern consoles. Now, the Switch, believe it or not, is one of the best systems to get import games for, because the Switch is a region-free system, which means no matter where you get the game from, you're going to be able to play it. Now, I have some super rare games here, because when you buy super rare games, those are considered import games. And usually when you get like an import, usually when you get an import Switch games, it's going to have either the PEGI symbol here that you see here. So we've got the PEGI rating system on some of these. There is another system that's used when you get like some games from East Asia Soft. I can't think of what the rating system is called right now off the top of my head. But these two games are two of my favorite games on the Switch. I sold off a bunch of my Switch stuff, but I decided to keep these two because these are 16-bit glory. These two 16-bit games on the Nintendo Switch are some of the best that I've seen put out. I'm sure there are more. It's been a while since I've done any real hardcore collecting for the Switch, but these are two that I definitely kept in my collection. The first one is Haiku, which is a great just 2D pixelized art style game based on this armored Kirby look-alike character here. And then Inmost is a little bit more of a dark 2D side scroller kind of hack and slash style game. Both of these are like Metroidvania style. Really like these here. These are some classics. And then I have a couple of limited ones here that you don't really see much out in the wild anymore. The first is Gigantic Army. This is more of like a run and gun mech warrior style game. Only 300 copies of these made, but this was produced by Pixel Heart, which I believe Pixel Heart is like, I think it's based in the UK maybe. So they've got some great games. I think Wallachia was released by Pixel Heart. And usually like their games, they do come with a manual, and they are numbered. Now, the cool thing is that I think Video Games New York, I don't know if they still have a deal, but for a while, a lot of the games that were being produced by Pixel Heart Games, you could get like more of an American version, I guess, through Video Games New York. I mean, it's the same game. It's just, I guess, just different. I don't know if there's a difference in translation. I don't even know if translation is needed. But Gigantic Army was one that I also kept in my Switch collection. Didn't sell that. And then, of course, you got Freedom Finger, which I've talked about this a ton on my channel. This is not a cute 'em up. I don't know what you call like a humorous space shooter, but this is a space shooter where your ship is actually a finger. And as you can see, this guy's flying through space, flipping the bird to all these enemies. So this is a more of a music driven one. It's got a ton of levels. I played this a bunch. It's a very fun and interesting game. And whenever I play it, it kind of gives me Steriden Binary Stars feels. But these are imports, right? So these are some really classic imports that you're not going to find at a Best Buy, right? You're not going to find these games at a Best Buy. You're going to have to really, kind of look online for some of these games. And the good thing about it is that whenever you do find them, online, if you can get to them first, because usually these sell out pretty quickly. But when you're able to jump on them and get them first, you are able to get them at a really good deal. Like most of these games, when they first released, were either $29.99 or about $35. So my recommendations when it comes to looking for Switch import games, definitely check out Super Rare. Definitely check out Strictly Limited. I think Nicalis might be import as well. So you got Nicalis, you got Strictly Limited, you got Super Rare, and then obviously East Asia Soft. If you check them out, they usually have some great imports there as well. Red Art Games, I know Red Art Games is sold in Best Buy, but I think that's also like an overseas producer of games as well. But my overall point here is that, especially when it comes to the Switch, have an open mind. Don't just look for the AAA titles from Nintendo, like the Super Mario games or the Zelda games and things like that. There's a ton of great content on the Switch that you can find when you just broaden your horizons a little bit. And if you are open to import games, I think you can really build out a very robust, quality Switch collection without breaking the bank. And I think the same can be said for the PlayStation 4. PlayStation 4 is in the same boat. We've got two games here. Both of these, I believe, are from either Limited Run. Yeah, I think these are two Limited Run games. And I'm not sure if Limited Run is import or not. Someone can let me know. I know that they release games that are import. I think I got Sword of the Vagrant through Limited Run, which I'm pretty sure when I first picked that up, that was also a PEGI rated game as well. But I've got two classics here in the PlayStation 4, and I still do collect for the PlayStation 4, not as heavily. But the only games that I really pick up for the PS4 are games like these, like the uncommon ones. I'm really not buying a bunch of Final Fantasy stuff and things like that, because I'm waiting on, when it comes to the AAA games on both the Switch and the PS4, I'm waiting for the life cycle to die down a little bit and for a lot of those games to go on clearance. Once those games are in the $5 to $10 range, I think that's the time to jump on it and capitalize. PlayStation, in my opinion, is in a weird space because the PS5, I guess that's their main system, and I could be wrong. Someone let me know down in the comments, but I just don't feel like it has that traction that the PS4 has or had. I feel like in the PS4's heyday, there was just way more traction around it. And I feel like people still are very much buying and collecting for the PlayStation 4, more so than the PlayStation 5. I could be wrong again, but you can let me know down in the comments. But when it comes to modern games, I think modern systems, it's extremely easy for you to build a strong collection of import games that don't break the bank, and you don't have to worry about translation as much when it comes to the newer systems. So if you're thinking about getting into import, start with the modern consoles. There's a ton of great content there at a really great price, and I think you'll be happy with what you find once you start to dig in and look a little bit. Now, shifting over to more of the retro systems. Now, and I'm going to go ahead and pull this a little bit closer, but I am a huge fan of arcade games, right? Huge fan of arcade style games. And unfortunately, here in the States, we never got some of the better arcade games. Going all the way back to the NES and Super NES and Genesis era, some of the best shoot 'em ups, some of the best beat 'em ups weren't released here. And I never understood why. And now, thankfully, with technology and with everything that we have available to us, now we have companies that are able to give us an opportunity to experience those games by re-releasing them or reproducing them and making them available via like repro carts. I've shown these two before in the past, but here we have a Sega Genesis example, right? So you have Lancer, which in my opinion, top 10 shoot 'em ups of all time. I love this game for the music. It has an amazing soundtrack. I can't play this game too much because like if I play this game for one afternoon, I'm going to be humming the music all day, especially the third level. The third level has amazing. I love the music on the third level. So, I mean, Lancer is a really cool one. But we never got it here, right? You were only able to play this on the Mega Drive. And even on the Mega Drive, this is one of the most expensive Mega Drive games. So you had two really big hurdles to get around if you wanted to experience Lancer. One, you had to be ready to, you have to be ready to ante up and pay up. Or you got to be willing to go ahead and get a Mega Drive system to play it because you won't be able to play it on the Genesis. There's also another game that there is a US version of it, and that is Battlemania Daijinjo. I think that's, forgive me if I'm missaying it. Let me know down in the comments if I butchered it. But Battlemania, the US version of Battlemania, if I'm not mistaken, is Troubleshooter. And while Troubleshooter is a great version of the game, in my opinion, Battlemania is way better. The music is better, the gameplay is better. I just like the way the game plays for the Mega Drive. So again, these are old school games that we wouldn't have been able to experience before, but you can now. And the cool thing is you can pick up this copy of Lancer, if I'm not mistaken, for like 35, 40 bucks. So for a fraction of the price of what you would pay for the original, you get a translated, pretty cool version, which comes with, you know, the cartridge right there. You get an art book, and just it gives you a little bit more history around the game and what it was about. And I really think that this is a really cool thing that they're doing these days to give everyone an opportunity to experience these games. That's for the Sega. When it comes to the Super Nintendo, here you have this super cool game that we never got to experience, Rendering Ranger, which is like, I think, a combination of like run and gun and shoot 'em up. I mean, look at that. 1 second you're running and gunning in this Super Turrican style Metroidvania game, and then the next minute it looks like you're kind of blasting your way through in this shoot 'em up style game. So amazing games like these, for some reason, they just didn't feel like we were deserving of here, and we were stuck with Mario. Nah, I'm not gonna play Mario like that. You know, I love Mario, but still, you know, for someone who's more of like an action style, arcade style guy or gal, these are the types of games that you would have wanted to play back in the day. Another one that comes to my mind, Alien Soldier. Now that's a Sega game. I believe that was another game that was originally released on the Mega Drive. We never got it here, but if you did pick up the Sega Genesis Mini 2, then you'll be able to play Alien Soldier there. I'm pretty sure it's been converted in other formats so that you can play it here in the States. But I mean, think about that. A game like that, tight controls, multiple weapons, various moves, every button has a function or a feature. Those are the types of games that we wanted to play back in the day. And it seems like when it comes to the games we got here in the States, those were few and far between. I want to say and then if we did get a game like that here, forget about it. That game was going to wind up costing you a ton of money. And, you know, with the game being retro now, it's probably, you know, out the window prices. One example that comes to my mind is I think it's Mech Warrior or Mech Assault. It's on the Super Nintendo. I'm butchering the name. I'll get the name before we. As a matter of fact, let me get that for you right now. What game is that? I've got it here in my little station here. It's right here. What is that? Metal Warriors. That's the one, right? So Metal Warriors is a ridiculously expensive game. Trying to get that complete in box is retarded. The card alone is about 500 bucks or something like that. So just more examples of just what we couldn't get here. Now, keeping the train going when it comes to imports, right? The Neo Geo is a great system. I've got my AES plugged up right here. Still got what do I have in there? Assault, Last Guardian that I'm playing right now. Now, the Neo Geo is known for just having ridiculously expensive games, but you can get cheaper versions as well if you do the imports. So my copy of Magician Lord is an import. I believe this is the Japanese version. I don't have the US version. I have it boxed. I don't have the manual. The manual would have been sick. But this is another really fun game that you can save money. And that's the other thing about buying imports. Imports is a great way to save money if you cannot afford the US version. And so I have that copy there. But there's no system that better demonstrates that than the Sega Saturn, which I save for last. Now, I do have a US Sega Saturn. I do have a standard one, but I do have a complete in box import Sega Saturn, and I love this guy. This guy's like minty fresh. I'm not gonna take it out the box because it's a pain in the butt to put it back in. But I'm such a fan of the Sega Saturn that I went ahead. I remember when I was collecting for the Saturn, I had a gentleman who had these old school RFID like remotes, the cordless remotes, and I was like, dude, this is so sick. Imagine in the 90s how sick this must have been, being able to play the Sega Saturn wirelessly. These are standard. These are OEM controls. These are not the ones that you see today by 8-bit or 8BitDo. These are not re-releases. These are the same exact standard Sega controllers, the RFID. These don't use like Bluetooth. These use RFID, so, or infrared. So if there's anything blocking it, it's not as, the connection isn't as good as what you would get on an 8BitDo, but still just playing on original hardware is just sick to me. And so I got the mother controller, and then I got the add-on here for some of the shoot 'em ups that I have whenever I have anyone that wants to come over and play any space shooters. But the Sega Saturn is the arcade console, like the Sega Saturn and the Neo Geo, and I'm a huge arcade guy. Do I have some RPGs in my collection? For sure, I do have RPGs in my collection, but if you're looking for arcade games, Saturn is the way to go. Now, when it comes to some of the better arcade games on the Sega Saturn, either they just were never released in the States, or the US version is like twice the price. So I learned very quickly when I was collecting for the Sega Saturn to stay away from the US versions unless there wasn't an import release, or unless the import version had no English translation. Now, right off the bat, I'll go through some of them with you. One of my favorite shoot 'em ups of all time, Radiant Silvergun. I remember getting this on the Sega Saturn. I've had this game for years. I actually had 2 copies of this, sold one of them. But Radiant Silvergun is a classic. I mean, a classic space shooter. It plays a lot. It feels like Ikaruga to me in a way. And this is an expensive one. It is expensive because I don't think that there's an English version on the Sega Saturn. Now, Limited Run or somebody, either Limited Run or Strictly Limited, recently released re-released a new version for it. So you can pick up a copy of Radiant Silvergun on the Nintendo Switch, so you don't have to jump out the window and spend the $250 or the $275 I think they're charging right now to have it. But if you did want to get it, you can get it today either on the Switch, or you can go out, and if you want to get like the hardware for it, and spend that hardware money for it, you're going to be looking at paying a pretty hefty price for it. So I definitely would recommend, if you've never played it before and you just want to get a feel for the game, I would recommend maybe trying it out on the Switch first before you jump out the window. But nothing beats that classic experience on the original hardware. I can tell you right now. And I've played a bunch of Sega Saturn games on the Switch, and it's just not the same. Like, the Saturn is one of the few systems that emulating it isn't very fun. Super Nintendo games, you can emulate all day. Sega Genesis, you can do it all day. But when it comes to the Saturn, you just don't get the same arcade feel. Now, I have a couple of examples of imports that are cheaper than the US version. Now, Layer Section is the import version of Galactic Attack. There's a game on the Sega Saturn called Galactic Attack. It is, I think, it is the space shooter. I didn't want to pay the prices for Galactic Attack because at the time, I think that I was like collecting for the Saturn. Prices were still very high on Saturn games, and I think Galactic Attack was well over $100. But for less than half the price, I was able to get Layer Section for like $39. And this is an example of where import games are just better than getting the US version, because it's the same game. It's a space shooter, so you really don't need to worry too much about any of the text in the game, because it's not an RPG. You don't need to read the story and know everything that's going on with the story. You really just need to know the controls and what you need to do to get through the levels, to beat the bosses, and pretty much end the game. So Galactic Attack is one example of just a cheaper version of an import game. Another example would be Marvel Superheroes. Marvel Superheroes, buying the, I don't even know actually if you can get this on the Sega Saturn. I don't know if there was a US version of this released. No, yeah, I don't know if there was a US version of this released on the Sega Saturn. I know that there's a version of this on the PlayStation 1, but I can't remember if this was released on the Sega Saturn, the US Sega Saturn. You can let me know down in the comments. Yeah, I don't think that X-Men versus Street Fighter and Marvel Superheroes versus Street Fighter got a Sega Saturn release, US. If I'm wrong, let me know down in the comments. I know X-Men Children of the Atom, I think that one got a release on the Sega Saturn US, but X-Men versus Street Fighter and Marvel Superheroes versus Street Fighter were strictly limited to the import Sega Saturn. And to me, again, whenever it comes to playing like these arcade games, Saturn trumps them all. Like, I wouldn't, if there is a X-Men versus Street Fighter game, I'm not gonna get it on the PlayStation. It's much better on the Sega Saturn because it's gonna run better, it's gonna feel better, the combos will feel better, the music sounds better, because this genuinely is an at-home arcade machine. The Saturn and the Neo Geo, if you're looking for that experience, in my opinion, that's where you go for that. Now, there are some imports that are exclusively imports that I want to shed a tear every time I think about them not being released in the US. And here's an example. I've talked about this game a ton on my channel, Hyper Duel. I would buy, and this is no exaggeration, I would buy an import Sega Saturn just to play this game. If you are a fan of space shooters, you have to play Hyper Duel. Now, hopefully one day, limited run or strictly limited, they do a re-release or they do a import of this game over to the Switch. But this is one of the sickest, I mean, one of the best space shooters, because you have the option at any time to transform between a mech, like a mech fighter style, or an airplane fighter style. So that's one of the first best things about this game. There is another game on the Sega CD that does that, and I think that's Assault Android. Android Assault. The only thing is, with Android Assault, you only can transform into the mech once you get a certain number of power-ups. If you like get hit, then you transform back into a plane, and you can't like go back to being like a mech. And this one, no matter how much energy you have, you can transform between the two. And obviously, when you're a mech, you have more power with your weapon, but you're slower. And if you're an airplane, obviously, or if you're a spaceship, you're more agile, you can dodge bullets a little bit better, but your bullets are a little weak. The other thing that makes this one sick is that not only do you get power-ups to your weapons, but you also get helpers. So you can either get miniature mechs that help you fight, or you get miniature airplanes that help you fight. And I think you can get up to 3 or 4 assisting you at one time. And as long as you don't get hit, they stay with you and they fight with you through the entire level. The only downside is that those can get hit. So if they do get hit, they can be blown out of the sky. But on the flip side of that, they might go kamikaze and take a couple shots for you and keep you alive. So look, Hyper Duel is just one of the best, in my opinion. It's one of the sickest. I've always loved this shoot 'em up, and I would get an import Saturn just for this one. And then last but not least, if you like your beat 'em ups, Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know if this ever got a US release on any US system or any US console, but the Dungeons and Dragons collection for Capcom, I think this is like these. Actually, am I wrong? No, I think there is a Dungeons and Dragons. I think it's on the Super Nintendo, actually, if I'm not mistaken. But this is a collection of those games. Obviously, like I always say, the beat 'em ups, the shoot 'em ups, the fighting games, they always play better on the import Saturn because they sound better, they look better. But these two games are not inexpensive. I'm just gonna jump right out and just say that Hyper Duel is easily a $600 to $700 game. So this is one that I would proceed with caution, and Dungeons and Dragons, I believe as well, is either a $200 to $250 game. So these are not cheap games by any means. But when it comes to like the X-Men versus Street Fighter games, these are fairly priced. I want to say somewhere in the neighborhood of $50. Layer section is like a $40 to $50 game, so you could definitely pick those up and enjoy those for a cheaper price than you would if you were to buy the US version. And then, like I said earlier, Radiant Silvergun, this also is not a cheaper game. You're going to ante up on that. That's at least $250. But overall, if you're building your collection, whether you're going Switch mode, if you're looking for Switch games, if you're looking for some PlayStation action, you're definitely, look at me, I'm so excited, I dropped the phone. you're definitely going to get great value by looking at import games on the Switch and the PlayStation 4. So definitely take a look at that. If you want to do like the reproduction games or the re-releases and experience some games from like the Genesis and Super Nintendo era, you can definitely find these on a lot of like the limited run websites or the strictly limited. They usually carry these here. You can probably check Amazon. If you're a Neo Geo fan, the good thing about that console is that it could play US and import, so be on the lookout for that. And if you're an arcade classic head like myself, the Saturn is the way to go. You can have like a US Saturn and use something like an action replay, but in my opinion, those carts, they give me issues. They always give me issues, and depending on the game, they just won't work. So if you want to just play it, the easiest way to play it, get yourself an import Saturn. Try some of these games out. I guarantee you it will be a Saturday afternoon well spent. I spent a lot of time talking about imports, but as you can see, they're special to me and they do have a special place in my collection. Let me know what you think. Are there any import games that I missed, or are there any other systems that are great for imports? I know a lot of people talk about PlayStation 1 imports, but I kind of stayed away from the PlayStation 1 import scene. Haven't gotten too deep into it yet. Haven't really seen a lot of import PlayStation 1 games that make me want to get one. But if I'm missing anything, let me know down in the comments. It's the Y2K Collector. Hopefully you're having a solid Saturday. Take it easy.